Hey everyone, welcome back. So as you can see, we got most of the roof framed. This is the main ridge of the house. So let's see how we got that done. So as you can see, we got Ramiro and Eliseo filling up the rafters in the main ridge. And we got Antonio and Juan firming up the roof above the stairwell. And while the guys did that, I installed that hip so they can continue filling in the rafters between those two roof planes. This looks really good from the road. This whole side is almost done. Just gotta finish this gable, that little gable right there, and filling in those dormers right there with that 612 pitch. Once all that's done, we're gonna move on to the ridges on that side of the house. So we're about to set this double LVL. Goes from this point all the way over there. These are just suspended in the air. We just use string lines to figure that out. And this changes to 612. So there's gonna be like a bastard valley right there. And right here as well. From this point to wherever it meets that 1212. So from here it's 1212 and then it changes to 612 right here. So we're about to set this LVL. Okay, so we got that LVL set. It was a double 9 1/4 LVL from valley to valley. And you can see us installing those 1212 rafters that tie into that LVL with hangers. And once they're all installed, they cut the valleys flush with that beam. So we can continue the bastard valley from there with 612 rafters on one side and 1212 rafters on the other. And here's a picture of what I mean. As you can see, there's a 612 pitch on one side and a 1212 on the other, with the bastard valley in between. From that point, we jumped to framing the roof on the left side of the house, but of course, we ran into some issues. The roof plan was outdated, and I didn't notice until we started setting the ridge on the backside and it wasn't working. After a couple minutes of confusion and frustration, I did further digging into the plans and of course, found that the roof plan was wrong. As you can see on the roof plan, it showed that the ridge lined up from front to back, therefore it would be at the same elevation. But when you look at the left view elevation, you see an obvious difference in elevation, which also means that they do not line up. The ridge coming from the front of the house is lower and further to the left of the house, as you can see on the left view elevation. So once I corrected that, the rest of the roof was a breeze.
So there's gonna be like a little cricket here. So I had to put like a little valley to make that cricket. Because if I overframe these, I would be losing a lot of headroom down there. So there's no other way but to do it this way. So I put a header here and then a little valley, and then I put a little sleeper here that you can see there. And now I'm gonna put some rafters that die on that roof over there to make that little cricket here. So that's only these rafters and those little rafters on the cricket, and we're done with the roof. Then we gotta start installing all the TNG, all the cedar tails everywhere. So that's gonna take a minute to do those. It's gonna be cedar tails here, and then TNG basically floating a foot off the rafters, so they're gonna be holding a suspended cedar barge rafter. So we gotta do that all the way around.
So once we were mostly done with the roof framing, I had two guys start with the rafter tail details. You can see the detail on the plan section view. We got 2 foot on center, 2x8 rough sawn cedar tails with 1x6 cedar tongue and groove boards nailed to the top of those. And then on top of that, we'll finish it off with 3/4 CDX plywood.
So this is the front of the house. We got that TNG, we got that 2x6 cedar fascia, the tails, and Eliseo and Juan are working on the same stuff on the backside. So once we're done with that, once we run all the TNG long, we can start sheeting this. And then I think we're gonna do that tomorrow. And then over here, we got the continuation of this roof. Let me come here. So the tails are gonna be curved, so Harmony is making those. So, but I got the roof frame, so we're just gonna wait on the tails. And then I wanna do this side, get the tails on this side. And once these two sides are sheathed, actually I'm gonna start the tails on that side and follow the same pattern on the peak and come down. That way I can work here without the tails. Sheet that, put the tails on this side, sheet that, and then I can start the tails on these, because those tails die into these roofs. These tails die on that one, those tails die on this one. So I need this one and that one done and sheeted, so I can start sheeting all of this up.
And as you can see, we only ran the TNG wherever there was going to be the exposed rafter tails and wherever it was going to be exposed or seen from underneath. You can see we ran the TNG up the gables and we ran them long. That way we could snap a line and just cut them straight once we finished sheathing the roof. As you can see, we got that barge rafter installed. We cut the TNG and the CDX plywood straight to the correct measurement, and then you can see Eliseo and Juan doing the same thing on the opposite side, installing the barge rafters. Once we finished this section of the roof, we started moving around the house installing the cedar tails and TNG, and also started sheathing as we went. Once we got that stairwell sheathed, we started papering the roof, and you can see on the left side, you can see Antonio start on that roof above the garage. That way, once I got both sides, the right and the left side, sheathed, I could start installing the cedar tails on the middle section.
So here we are installing the cedar tails. They installed the sheathing above, but this is the process to get these eaves done. It's very time consuming. For the tails in this area, I think I'm gonna make a little hole there and just tie it with that stud. And then these I'm just gonna have to screw, and I'm just gonna run my fascia from one of those strong ones to one of these strong ones. That way those three in the middle are supported. Plus that one in the middle is gonna be a little stronger than these other two next to it, since I'm gonna make a little hole and tie it to that stud. So that's the only way to work around these cedar tails. But we're getting it done. And to get them on the right spot, they have to be 3/4 below the rafters. So what I'm doing is I put a temporary 2x, screw it down, put a TNG board there, screw that down, TNG board up there, screw that down, so it's perfectly in plane with the rafters, but perfectly 3/4 lower than the rafters, because we're gonna put tongue and groove TNG all the way through here. And then on top of that TNG, here, let me show you. That's a TNG, it's gonna run like this. And this TNG is flush with the rafters. And then we're gonna cover the TNG and the cedar tails with the 3/4 CDX plywood. So that's the process. So I just wanted to note that these rafter tails are called out to be 24 inches on center or 2 foot on center. But all my rafters, all my framing everywhere is 16 on center. So that's another thing that takes a minute to figure out. So this happened to fall next to one of the 16s, so every other 16s I have one next to the rafters, so that's good. That saves me time. But one of them is supposed to be centered to that lower window, so it ended up working out with my framing. I think it was off like 1/4, which is fine. nearly all done with the sheeting. All we gotta do now is cut these straight. They're run long for TNG. Now we're just going and cutting everything straight and installing the barge rafters. Those barge rafters on the end. Once those are in, we're papering them in. But we're pretty much done with the roof. Well, actually I gotta do this curved roof down here in this study room. Okay, so we're gonna cut that radius. It's calling for a 20-foot 9 3/8 radius for the rafters. They're gonna swoop this way and then also from this side. Let me show you. So they swoop that way, and then it also swoops this way. So the rafters on this side will be 20-foot 9 3/8. And the rafters on that side the same. The only thing that changes is this hip right here. It's not gonna be the same radius. It's gonna be elliptical basically, because it's accepting the radius from both sides. So we're gonna figure that out. But first, to mark this radius on some sheeting, got some scraps. I put a hole there at 3 inches, and then from there I measured 20 foot 9 3/8, and then I added 9.5 because that's the thickness they want for those rafters. So 9.5 plus, I'm sorry, my mark 20 foot 9 3/8 plus 9.5. That way I can mark both sides of my rafter as I swing it around. I'm actually gonna hook it on that corner there. I got enough room here to mark it. So let's put it over there and see how it works. Okay, so that's screwed into place over there. We got our scrap here. Got my 9.5 notch. That would be the bottom. The bottom of the rafter. That would be the top of the rafter. So I marked it here, and I put a 5.5 heel height above plate, because that's what it's calling for on this heel height. So now that I have that heel height, that's basically my wall height. So I snapped that wall height through, because I gotta figure out how tall that hip is. So I gotta mark a regular rafter first to find out my hip. Now that's my height. Now the depth of the framing over there is, let me show you. So it's gonna be 127 from here to there. We got 127 3/8. So that means from there to here I have to have 127 3/8 as well. So what we're making right now is one of these rafters. That way I can figure out my height. My height at 127 3/8. How high it goes. Alright, let's get back. Once I figured out the height and the length of the hip using the radius provided on the plan, I could now start building a jig to mark the hip. Since the roof is curved on both sides, the hip is essentially a partial ellipse, which is created between the two curved or sweeping slopes of the roof. So here on the ground you can see us laying out a big L shape, which is basically serving as a giant rafter square,
or a giant square. And on the big stick that we put together, I marked 2 dimensions, half the width and half the height of the ellipse created by these 2 sweeps. Through those 2 marks, I set a nail. Then I had one guy on each mark as I turned the stick to mark the hip. The key is to make sure that the nails are rubbing against the edge, as we may call it, the edge of the square at all times. And I will be making a more in-depth video in the future of how I figured those dimensions out. Here are all the rafters. We're about to start assembly. Juan has been cutting all of them. So there's a hip up there. Oh, I got some sheathing in the way. So it's a triple plywood, screws every 8 inches, glued in between. That's what it calls for, the structural. So it's just temporarily sitting there. We're about to straighten it after lunch and install all the rafters. So it's gonna look cool. And it's not gonna interfere with the windows, so it's perfect. On the original plan, there was gonna be a flat spot there, but not anymore. So that works out perfect. So here's the roof. Getting in the last couple rafters. Looks great. Yep. We just gotta build some scaffolding here, build some scaffolding over there, and attach those cedar tails that arrived from Harmony. And put a header there. They want me to stay 2 inches off the masonry. I gotta notch that LVL. I didn't think about that over here too. But I did think about it there, but I'll just sawzall it off. We'll sheet it with double 3/8 sheets on Monday. But here's the frame, it's all done. And we just gotta put the tails in.
No existe distancia para separarnos, porque hoy está bien más enamorado de amor.
Once we were done with the curved roof in the back of the house, we went back to the front and worked on those curved rafters on that entry. You can see that we installed the curved rafters, we installed the sheathing, and we're finishing the roof by installing that barge rafter. Once we were done with that curved barge rafter, and that barge rafter above the stairwell roof, we started installing the barge rafters around the house. After finishing installing all the barge rafters around the house, we started installing the fascias on the timber porch. We did not install the timbers, actually a company called Harmony installed them. As you can see, they installed the posts, the beams, and the rafters, the hips, and the ridge. All we did to finish this roof off was install the 2x6 fascias, the 1x6 TNG boards, and the 3/4 CDX sheeting. So we did run into a couple issues with these rafters. The short point on the rafter tails of these timbers were not level with each other. They were not lining up. When we put up the 2x6 fascia, the top edge of the 2x6 was not lining up with all the rafter tails. So what we had to do was plane down a couple of the rafter tails. Some of them were high, some of them were low. So some we shimmed up to nothing a couple feet up, and some we had to plane to nothing a couple feet up. So at the end we made it work, and it all was perfectly straight and level with each other.
So here's the roof, finally done. So, time to move on to the next project.